Captain Elena Vasquez stared out the massive window of the space station at the dying star. Kepler 442 had once burned bright yellow, giving life to 3 worlds full of billions of people. Now it flickered like a candle in the wind, its light growing weaker each day. The meeting room behind her buzzed with angry voices. 12 different alien species had worked together for 300 years trying to save this star. They had built the biggest space station ever made, spent more money than some planets were worth, and lost thousands of lives in the process. Now they were giving up. "The numbers do not lie," said Prime Minister Teclon, his crystal-like body catching the dim starlight. The Zephyrian leader stood nearly 9 feet tall, and his voice rang like music when he spoke. "We have a 0.3% chance of success. The risk of creating a black hole is 47%. If that happens, 3 star systems will die." Around the long table, representatives from 11 other species nodded their agreement. The Vialthans, who could do math faster than computers, had checked the numbers a dozen times. The Cathara, whose emotions ran so deep they could barely function when sad, wept openly at the thought of the deaths they might cause. Even the Kreks, warriors who had never lost a battle in their 1,000-year history, shook their massive heads. In defeat, Elena turned away from the window and looked at her fellow humans. There were only 5 of them in the room, representing Earth and all her colonies. The other species had hundreds of representatives each. Humans were still the new kids in this galactic neighborhood. "Captain Vasquez," said Ambassador Veltar, of the hegemony, her snake-like body coiled in what Elena had learned meant respect. "Surely your people see the wisdom in withdrawal. This mission has already cost too much." Elena walked slowly back to the table. Her boots clicked on the metal, floor in the sudden quiet. Every alien eye in the room watched her. They expected her to agree, to pack up Earth's small contribution to the project and go home like everyone else. "How many people live in those 3 star systems?" Elena asked. "Approximately 47 billion sentient beings," replied Dr. Kethmore, the Vialtan scientist. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he spoke. "But Captain, saving them is mathematically impossible." "Impossible?" Elena repeated the words slowly. She looked around the table at faces that belonged to species thousands of years older than humanity. Beings who had traveled between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. "That's an interesting word." She moved to the big display screen that showed their plan. "For 3 centuries, the greatest minds of 12 species had worked on Project Lazarus. They wanted to restart the dying star using something called quantum resonance. It was elegant, precise, and according to every calculation, hopeless." "You want to sing the star back to life," Elena said, pointing at the display. "Use harmonic frequencies to gently wake up the fusion reactions in the core. It's beautiful, it's smart, and according to your math, it won't work." "Precisely," said Teclon. "We have exhausted every possibility. The stellar core is too far gone. The quantum resonance chambers cannot generate sufficient power. The risk of catastrophic failure is too great." Elena nodded slowly. "Prime Minister, can I ask you something? Has any species at this table ever held a defensive position when outnumbered 1,000 to 1? The aliens looked at each other in confusion. "Such a scenario would be tactically impossible," said General Krexnor, the massive warrior's voice like grinding stone. "No force could hold against such odds." "We did it at a place called Thermopylae," Elena said calmly. 300 Spartans held off an army of 300,000 for 3 days. "But they lost," pointed out Dr. Kethmore. "They lost the battle," Elena agreed. "But they won something more important. They proved it could be done. They bought time for others to prepare. Sometimes losing the right way is better than not trying at all." She moved to another section of the display. "Has anyone here ever turned a complete disaster into a victory? Taken something that was falling apart and made it work anyway?" "I do not understand the relevance," said Teclon. "We had a mission to our moon that almost killed 3 astronauts. Apollo 13. Everything went wrong. Explosion in space, no power, running out of air. Our best scientists said the crew was dead, but we brought them home anyway. We didn't give up because the math looked bad." Elena turned to face the assembly. Here's what I think happened here. You're all too smart. You ran the numbers, saw the odds, and made the logical choice. But sometimes logic isn't enough. Captain, said Veltar gently, this is not some primitive war where courage overcomes physics. This is reality. Cold, unforgiving mathematics. Is it? Elena pulled up another display, showing Earth's history of spaceflight. Our best scientists proved that powered flight was impossible. They had the math to back it up. 6 months later, 2 bicycle mechanics flew anyway. We were told breaking the sound barrier would kill pilots. We did it anyway. We were told the human body couldn't survive space travel. We did it anyway. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the station's life support systems. Elena could see the aliens thinking, trying to understand how humans could be so illogical. Every species here is older than humanity, Elena continued, wiser, more advanced. You've mastered technologies we can barely understand, but there's one thing we're really, really good at. We specialize in making impossible things possible. She gestured toward the dying star outside. You've spent 300 years trying to solve this the smart way. Maybe it's time someone tried the stupid way. What are you suggesting? Asked Theclon. Elena looked at her 4 fellow humans. Dr. Sarah Chen, the physicist who had argued for months that there might be another approach to stellar engineering. Commander James Martinez, the engineer who had designed impossible machines and somehow made them work. Lieutenant Rebecca Park, the communications officer who had convinced Earth Command to let them come this far. Dr. Michael Reeves, the doctor who had volunteered to risk his life to save strangers on distant worlds. They all nodded. It was a tiny gesture, but Elena had her answer. Prime Minister, the Terran Federation volunteers to complete Project Lazarus. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. For a long moment, no one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Captain, Theclon said finally, this is not a matter of brave words or good intentions. If you fail, you do not simply die. You potentially murder 47 billion innocent beings. And if we do nothing, Elena replied, they definitely die when the star burns out in 6 months. Prime Minister, we're not asking you to stay. We're not asking you to risk your people. We're just asking you to let us try. This is madness, whispered Dr. Kethmore. Maybe, Elena agreed. But it's our kind of madness. Give us your research data, your equipment, anything you can spare. Then get your people to a safe distance and let us work. She walked back to the window and looked out at the dying star. Behind her, she could hear the aliens talking in a dozen different languages, trying to understand what the humans were proposing. Captain, said Theclon finally, why are you willing to do this? Elena smiled, still looking at the star. Prime Minister, maybe that's the difference between our species and yours. You do the math first, then decide if something's possible. We decide it needs to be done, then figure out how to make the math work. The crystal being was quiet for a long moment. Your species is either very brave or very foolish. Prime Minister, Elena said, turning back to face him. In our experience, those two things are pretty much the same. 3 weeks after the other species left, Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the cargo bay of their ship and tried not to laugh. The vessel they had been given was basically spare parts held together with hope and stubbornness. The aliens had called it the Defiance, probably as a joke. Elena thought the name fit perfectly. Captain, I'm not going to lie to you, said Chief Engineer Martinez, wiping grease off his hands with a dirty rag. This ship shouldn't be able to fly. Half the systems are from different species. None of them were designed to work together, and the computer speaks 4 languages, but none of them are English. Elena nodded. Can you make it work? Oh, I can make it work, Martinez grinned. It won't be pretty, and it'll probably fall apart if we sneeze too hard, but it'll work. Around them, 67 humans worked to turn the collection of alien technology into something that could actually complete their mission. They were engineers, scientists, doctors, and technicians. Some had volunteered for glory, others had volunteered because someone had to. All of them knew they probably weren't coming home. Dr. Sarah Chen called everyone together in what used to be the ship's main meeting room. Now it was filled with jury-rigged equipment and displays showing their plan. It looked nothing like the elegant quantum resonance system the other species had designed. "Okay, people," Dr. Chen began, pointing at the main display. "The Coalition spent 300 years trying to restart this star using precision quantum resonance. They wanted to gently wake up the fusion reactions in the core using harmonic frequencies." She switched to a new display showing their approach. "We're going to hit it with the quantum equivalent of a defibrillator." Silence filled the room. Then Lieutenant Park raised her hand. "Doc, when you say defibrillator, do you mean—" "I mean we're going to shock the star back to life using 3 antimatter cores firing simultaneously," Dr. Chen said calmly. "Basically controlled stellar defibrillation." More silence. Then someone in the back started laughing. Soon half the room was chuckling, not because it was funny, but because it was so completely, utterly human to look at a dying star and think, maybe we should try jump-starting it. "What are the odds this works?" asked Technician Kim. "Honestly, maybe 1 in 1,000, Dr. Chen replied. "But that's 1,000 times better than the 0% chance of doing nothing." Elena stepped forward. "People, I want you to understand what we're attempting here. We're going to fly into the outer layer of a dying star, perform surgery on something the size of a small planet, and then try to restart nuclear fusion using a method that's never been tested." She looked around the room at faces she had come to know well over the past 3 weeks. These weren't the best and brightest humanity had to offer. They were just people who had stepped forward when stepping forward was needed. "Earth Command sent me a message this morning," Lieutenant Park announced. "The other species are calling this the human folly. The news across 12 worlds is covering our mission as either the greatest act of courage in galactic history or the most spectacular suicide attempt ever recorded." "Well," said Elena, "we've been called worse. Let's prove them wrong." The Defiance slowly pulled away from the space station. Behind them, the massive structure that had housed the Coalition's 3-century project grew smaller. Ahead of them, the dying star, Kepler 442, waited like a patient on an operating table. The Coalition fleet had moved to what they called a safe observation distance, about 3 light-years away. Elena couldn't blame them. If the human plan went wrong, the explosion would be visible from neighboring galaxies. As they approached the star's outer edge, strange readings began showing up on their sensors. Dr. Chen frowned at her displays, running the numbers again and again. "Captain," she called out, "I'm seeing something weird here. The star isn't just dying naturally. Something is actively killing it." Elena moved to look over the scientist's shoulder. The readings were beyond anything in their textbooks. "What kind of something?" Dr. Chen's fingers flew over her controls, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. "It looks like microscopic dark matter parasites. They're inside the star, consuming the fusion material from within." The implications hit everyone at the same time. Engineer Martinez was the first to speak. "If there are parasites in this star, are there parasites in other stars?" Dr. Chen ran a long-range scan of nearby star systems. What she found made her go very quiet for a very long time. "Captain," she said finally, "this isn't just one dying star. We're looking at a plague. These dark matter parasites are spreading from star to star across the entire sector. If we don't stop them here, dozens of solar systems will eventually go dark." Elena felt the weight of the discovery settle on her shoulders. It wasn't just 47 billion lives at stake anymore. It was potentially hundreds of billions across multiple worlds. "Why didn't the Coalition detect this?" asked Lieutenant Park. "Because they were studying the star from a safe distance," Dr. Chen replied. "The parasites are too small to detect unless you're practically inside the star's outer layer. They spent 300 years looking at the symptoms while the disease spread." Elena made a command decision that would have horrified the Coalition fleet if they had known about it. "All right, people. Change of mission parameters. We're not just restarting a star anymore. We're performing surgery on it." "Surgery?" Martinez looked skeptical. "Captain, we're engineers and scientists, not doctors." "Actually," said Dr. Reeves from his position at the medical station, "it's not that different from treating an infection. We need to kill the parasites before we can restart the fusion process." Dr. Chen began working on modifications to their defibrillation plan. "If we can create targeted energy bursts, we might be able to disrupt the parasites' feeding patterns. Think of it as quantum antibiotics. How close do we need to get to make that work?" Elena asked. Dr. Chen did some quick calculations. Her face went pale. We'll need to enter the star's corona, the outer layer of the star itself. The room went very quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. The corona of even a dying star was hot, enough to vaporize most materials instantly. Their ship's shields could maybe protect them for a few hours at most. How long will the treatment take? Elena asked. For the parasite elimination and the stellar restart sequence? At least 8 hours. Elena looked around the room at her crew. They had signed up to attempt the impossible. Now they were being asked to attempt something beyond impossible. Captain, said Martinez quietly, our shields won't last 8 hours in a stellar corona. Maybe 4 hours at most, and that's if everything goes perfectly. Then we'll have to work faster, Elena said simply. Dr. Chen pulled up the technical specifications on her screen. We'll need to modify the deflector array to create the quantum antibiotic effect. Then we'll need to recalibrate the antimatter cores for the restart sequence. And we'll need to do all of this while inside a star. Can it be done? Elena asked. Dr. Chen looked at her readings one more time. Captain, according to every physics textbook ever written, what we're planning is completely impossible. Elena smiled. Dr. Chen, have you ever read about the Wright brothers? The first human flight? Of course. Their first airplane shouldn't have been able to fly either. Too heavy, not enough power, wrong wing design. But somehow it worked anyway. Elena addressed the entire crew. People, we came here to do something impossible. Now we're being asked to do something beyond impossible. The question is, are we going to let a little thing like physics stop us? The crew looked at each other. These were humans who had volunteered for a suicide mission to save strangers on distant worlds. Physics was just another obstacle to overcome. All right, said Martinez, rolling up his sleeves. Let's build something that shouldn't work, and make it work anyway. As the Defiance continued its approach to Kepler 442, the crew began modifications that would have made the Coalition's engineers call them insane. They were preparing to fly into the heart of a dying star, fight an infection that was spreading across the galaxy, and restart nuclear fusion using equipment held together with spare parts and determination. In other words, they were about to do something completely, utterly human. The edge of Kepler 442's corona looked like the mouth of hell itself. Streams of superheated gas twisted in massive loops, each one larger than Earth's entire solar system. The dying star's surface churned with violent storms that could swallow planets whole. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched their destination grow larger on the main screen. Behind them, the Coalition fleet waited at what they considered a safe distance, 3 light-years away. The aliens thought the humans were about to commit the most spectacular suicide in galactic history. Elena was starting to think they might be right. Captain, called out Dr. Chen from her science station, I'm detecting massive gravitational fluctuations as we approach the corona. The star's magnetic field is incredibly unstable. Can our shields handle it? Elena asked. Chief Engineer. Martinez looked up from his control panel. His face was covered in sweat from the rising heat, even though their cooling systems were running at maximum. Shields are holding for now. But Captain, once we enter the corona itself, we're looking at temperatures over 2 million degrees. Our shields weren't designed for this. Elena nodded. She had known from the beginning that this mission would probably kill them all. But 47 billion people would die if they failed, and now they knew the dark matter plague was spreading to other star systems. The math was simple, even if the physics was impossible. How long until we reach the treatment zone? She asked. 15 minutes, replied Lieutenant Park from Communications. Captain, I'm getting some very worried messages from the Coalition. Fleet. They're asking us to reconsider. Elena smiled grimly. Tell them we appreciate their concern, but we have work to do. The Defiance continued its descent into hell. The ship groaned around them as the star's gravity field began to take hold. Warning lights flashed across every control panel as systems strained beyond their limits. Entering the corona in 10, 9, 8, Dr. Chen counted down. Elena gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered. Outside the viewports, space disappeared in a blaze of nuclear fire. They were now flying inside a star, surrounded by plasma hot enough to instantly vaporize any normal matter. Shields holding at 70%, Martinez reported. But they're dropping fast. At this rate, we have maybe 4 hours before total shield failure. How long do we need for the parasite treatment? Elena asked Dr. Chen. At least 6 hours for complete elimination, plus 2 more hours for the stellar restart sequence. Elena felt her stomach drop. They needed 8 hours inside the corona, but their shields would last 4 hours at most. The math was impossible, but they were committed now. All right, people, Elena announced to the crew. We knew the odds when we signed up. Let's make every minute count. The next hour was like working inside a furnace while riding an earthquake. The ship bucked and rolled as solar flares slammed against their shields. Systems overloaded and had to be repaired on the spot. The temperature inside the Defiance climbed steadily, despite their cooling systems running at maximum power. Dr. Chen and her team worked frantically to map the dark matter parasites. They were everywhere, tiny specks of hungry darkness eating the star from the inside out. Worse, the parasites seemed to sense the ship's presence and were beginning to swarm toward them. "Captain," Dr. Chen called out, "the parasites are adapting. They're trying to attach to our hull. Can they get through the shields? Not directly, but they're causing interference with our equipment. If enough of them cluster around us, we could lose sensor contact with the star's core." Engineer Martinez pulled himself out from under a control panel, his uniform singed from an electrical fire he had just put out. "I've got an idea. It's crazy, but crazy seems to be working for us so far." "I'm listening," Elena said. "What if we use our deflector array like a bug zapper? Modify the frequency to target the parasites directly. Instead of treating the whole star, we clear a path as we go." Dr. Chen looked up from her calculations. That might actually work. We could create a localized treatment zone around the ship, then expand it outward in pulses. "Do it!" Elena ordered. For the next 2 hours, the crew of the Defiance worked miracles with spare parts and desperation. They rewired systems that had never been designed to work together, jury-rigged solutions that shouldn't have been possible, and somehow managed to turn their ship into the galaxy's first stellar medical device. The deflector array hummed to life, with a sound like singing metal. Pulses of modified energy swept out from the ship, and the dark matter parasites began to die. On Dr. Chen's screens, clear zones appeared in the star's core like patches of healthy tissue. "It's working!" Dr. Chen shouted over the noise of straining machinery. "The parasites are being eliminated faster than they can reproduce." But the celebration was short-lived. The energy required to power their makeshift parasite treatment was putting enormous strain on their already overloaded systems. "Captain," Martinez called out, "I'm reading cascade failures throughout the ship. Life support is down to backup. Power. Shields are at 30% and falling. And we've got hull breaches on decks 3 and 5. Elena looked around the bridge. Half the control panels were dark or showing error messages. The air tasted of smoke and ozone. 3 crew members had already been taken to the medical bay with radiation poisoning. "How much more time do we need?" she asked Dr. Chen. 3 more hours to finish the parasite elimination, then 2 hours for the stellar restart sequence. 5 more hours. Their shields would fail in 2 hours at most. Elena made a decision that she knew would probably kill them all, but it was the only chance they had. "Martinez, shut down life support on all non-essential decks. Reroute all available power to the shields. Captain, that means anyone working in those sections will be exposed to lethal radiation." Elena activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We need to concentrate our remaining power on the shields. Everyone not directly involved in the mission, report to the central core sections immediately. We're going to lose life support on the outer decks." She paused, looking out at the nuclear hell surrounding them. "I won't lie to you people, we're probably not going home. But we came here to save 47 billion lives, and that's exactly what we're going to do." The crew responded with typical human stubbornness. Instead of panicking, they worked faster. Technicians sealed hull breaches with emergency patches. Engineers rerouted power through systems that should have exploded under the load. Medical staff treated radiation sickness while continuing to monitor the mission parameters. 3 light years away, the Coalition fleet watched in amazement as energy readings from the human ship spiked beyond anything they thought possible. The Defiance was somehow succeeding where centuries of careful planning had failed. "The humans are eliminating the parasites," reported Dr. Kethmore to the Coalition command ship. "Their treatment method is crude, but it appears to be effective." Prime Minister Teclon watched the energy readings with something approaching awe. How are they surviving in those conditions? Unknown, replied the Velthon scientist. By all calculations, their ship should have been destroyed hours ago. Inside the Corona, Elena felt the Defiance shudder as another major system failed. The main computer went offline completely, replaced by a network of backup processors that Technician Kim described as held together by coffee and prayer. Captain, Dr. Chen announced, parasite elimination is complete. The star's core is clear of infection. Elena allowed herself a moment of hope. They had actually done it. They had cured a dying star of a plague that was spreading across the galaxy. Now comes the hard part, Dr. Chen continued. We need to restart nuclear fusion in the stellar core. That means channeling the power of 3 antimatter cores through our deflector array simultaneously. Elena looked at the readings. Their shields were down to 15%. Hull temperature was climbing toward the melting point of their armor. Half the crew was suffering from radiation exposure. What happens when we fire the antimatter cores? Elena asked. Dr. Chen hesitated. Captain, the energy release will be visible from 30 light-years away, and there's a significant chance it will vaporize us instantly. What about the star? If it works, Kepler 442 will burn brighter than it has in 1,000,000 years. 3 star systems will be saved and will have proved that the dark matter plague can be stopped. And if it doesn't work? Dr. Chen managed a weak smile. We'll create a very pretty light show before we die. Elena looked around the bridge one more time. Her crew was exhausted, radiation sick, and working with equipment that shouldn't function. They were inside a dying star, surrounded by plasma that could cook them instantly if their failing shields dropped for even a second, but they had come this far. They had done the impossible once already today. Dr. Chen, Elena said calmly, you may fire when ready. The Defiance had become a ghost ship held together by human stubbornness and spare parts. Half the corridors were sealed off due to hull breaches. The air recycling system wheezed like an old man with lung problems. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through smoke that never quite cleared. Captain Elena Vasquez could feel the radiation working its way through her body like slow poison. Her hands shook slightly as she gripped her command chair, and she had developed a cough that brought up blood. Around her, the bridge crew looked like survivors of a war zone, which in many ways they were. Shield status? She asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. 8% and falling, reported Chief Engineer Martinez. His voice was hoarse from breathing the smoky air. Captain, we've got maybe 30 minutes before total shield collapse. Dr. Chen looked up from her science station. Her face was pale and drawn, marked with exhaustion and radiation sickness, but her eyes still held determination. The stellar restart sequence is ready. All 3 antimatter cores are at full power, synchronized and ready to discharge. Elena nodded slowly. They had eliminated the dark matter parasites from Kepler 442's core, but that was only half the battle. Now they had to restart nuclear fusion in a star that had been dying for centuries. It was like trying to restart a heart that had been stopped for too long. What are our chances? She asked. Dr. Chen looked at her readouts one more time. Honestly, Captain, I have no idea. The physics models break down at this scale. We're attempting something that's never been tried before, using equipment that was never designed for this purpose, in conditions that should have killed us hours ago. So you're saying it's a typical Tuesday for humans, Lieutenant Park said, from her communications station. Despite everything, she managed a weak smile. Elena actually laughed, which turned into another coughing fit. When she recovered, she looked around at her crew. They were dying slowly, all of them. Radiation was cooking them from the inside out, and their ship was falling apart around them, but they were still here, still working, still determined to complete their mission. Dr. Chen, before we fire those antimatter cores, I want you to understand something, Elena said. When we pull this trigger, the energy release will probably kill us instantly. Are you okay with that? Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up at the main screen, which showed the dying star around them. Somewhere beyond this nuclear hell were 3 inhabited star systems full of people who would die if Kepler 442 went dark. Captain, my daughter lives on New Geneva in the Kepler 442 system. She's 7 years old, and she loves to draw pictures of the sunset over the crystal lakes. If we don't restart this star, she'll never see another sunset. Dr. Chen's voice was steady as steel. I'm ready when you are. Elena felt a surge of pride in her crew. These weren't superheroes or legendary warriors. They were just people who had volunteered to risk everything to save strangers. It was perhaps the most human thing imaginable. All stations, prepare for stellar restart sequence, Elena announced over the ship's communication system. This is it, people. Everything we've worked for comes down to the next few minutes. The antimatter cores began their final power-up sequence. Throughout the ship, energy readings climbed to levels that should have been impossible. The Defiance groaned and shuddered as forces beyond imagination built up in her modified deflector. Array! Captain, Martinez called out. I'm reading power fluctuations throughout the ship. The antimatter containment fields are holding, but barely. If we're going to do this, it has to be now. Elena took one last look around the bridge. Lieutenant Park was at her station, ready to broadcast their final report to the Coalition fleet. Dr. Reeves was in the medical bay, treating crew members who should have been evacuated hours ago but refused to leave their posts. Technician Kim was under a control panel somewhere, keeping their improvised systems running through pure willpower. They were all going to die. Elena had accepted that hours ago, but they were going to die trying to save 47 billion lives, and that made all the difference. Dr. Chen, Elena said calmly, initiates stellar restart sequence. Antimatter cores at maximum power, Dr. Chen reported. Deflector array synchronized, target locked on stellar core. The ship's lights dimmed as every available joule of energy was channeled into their makeshift stellar defibrillator. The sound of the charging cores rose to a high whine that seemed to vibrate through their bones. Firing in 10 seconds, Dr. Chen announced. Elena closed her eyes and thought about Earth. Blue skies, green grass, and the sound of children playing in parks. She thought about all the worlds orbiting Kepler 442, full of beings she had never met but was about to die trying to save. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fire. 3 antimatter cores discharged simultaneously, releasing more energy than had ever been channeled through a single device in galactic history. The Defiance became a conduit for forces that could crack planets, directing them all into the dying heart of Kepler 442. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the universe held its breath. Then the star went dark. Complete, absolute darkness surrounded them. The nuclear fires that had burned for billions of years simply stopped. Elena felt her heart stop beating as she realized they had failed. Instead of restarting the star, they had killed it completely. 3 light years away, the Coalition fleet detected the massive energy discharge and the sudden absence of stellar radiation. Prime Minister Thecklon prepared to compose humanity's epitaph, believing the humans had just created the greatest disaster in galactic history. The darkness lasted for 17 seconds. Then Kepler 442 exploded back to life, not the gentle rekindling the Coalition had hoped for, but a brilliant, roaring renaissance of nuclear fusion that sent shockwaves through space itself. The star blazed with light brighter than it had burned in millions of years, its newly restarted core pumping out energy at levels that made nearby planets shine like jewels. Inside the corona, the Defiance was battered by the stellar rebirth happening around them. Systems that had been failing suddenly stabilized as the star's magnetic field reorganized itself. The dark matter parasites that had been consuming the star were completely eliminated by the intense radiation. Report! Elena shouted over the noise of celebrating machinery. All systems stable? Martinez sounded confused by his own readings. Captain, the star's energy output is actually protecting us now. The radiation pressure is pushing us away from the core, and the stabilized magnetic field is acting like additional shielding. Dr. Chen was staring at her instruments in amazement. Captain, it worked. It actually worked. Kepler 442 is not just restarted. It's burning cleaner and brighter than our models predicted. The stellar core is completely healthy. Elena activated. Ship-wide communications. All hands, this is the captain. Mission accomplished. We have successfully restarted Kepler 442. The star will burn for another billion years. Cheers echoed through the corridors of the Defiance, though they were weak cheers from crew members who were barely conscious from radiation exposure. Captain, Lieutenant Park called out, I'm receiving communications from the Coalition fleet. They're asking how we're still alive. Elena looked out at the reborn star surrounding them. Streams of healthy plasma flowed in organized patterns, the chaotic death throes of the dying star replaced by the steady rhythm of renewed nuclear fusion. "Tell them we're still alive because we're too stubborn to die," Elena said, managing a smile despite the pain in her chest. "And Lieutenant? Send our technical data to the Coalition. If this plague is spreading to other stars, they'll need to know how we stopped it." Dr. Chen was running final scans of the stellar core. "Captain, I'm detecting something interesting. The restart process didn't just cure this star, it seems to have created an immunity to the dark matter parasites. The stellar magnetic field is now configured to repel them automatically. Meaning this star can't be infected again. And if we can replicate this process on other stars, we can stop the plague from spreading entirely." Elena felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They hadn't just saved 47 billion lives, they had potentially saved the galaxy from a plague that could have consumed hundreds of star systems. "Captain," Martinez called out, "our engines are back online. The star's renewed energy field is actually charging our power systems. We can make it out of the corona under our own power." Elena nodded slowly. "Take us home, Mr. Martinez. I think we've had enough excitement for one day." As the Defiance began its journey out of Kepler 442's corona, Elena looked one last time at the reborn star. It burned bright and steady, exactly as it should. 3 worlds full of children would continue to see sunrises. Dr. Chen's daughter would keep drawing pictures of crystal lakes under alien skies. "Captain," Dr. Chen said quietly, "we actually did it. We accomplished something that 12 species said was impossible." Elena leaned back in her command chair, finally allowing exhaustion to wash over her. "Dr. Chen, the impossible is just another word for something nobody's figured out how to do yet." Behind them, Kepler 442 burned with renewed life, a beacon of hope in a galaxy that had learned never to underestimate the stubborn determination of the human species. 6 months later, Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the medical bay of the Coalition space station, watching Dr. Reeves check her latest radiation readings. The treatment had been long and painful, but she was finally healthy enough to return to active duty. "How do I look, Doc?" she asked. Dr. Reeves smiled as he reviewed her charts. "Like someone who flew into a star and lived to tell about it. You're cleared for duty, Captain. Try not to do anything quite so dramatic for a while." Elena laughed. "I'll do my best, but you know how it is. Someone always needs saving from the impossible." She walked through the corridors of the station, noting how much had changed. The halls that had once been filled with defeated aliens preparing to abandon their 3-century project now buzzed with activity. Scientists from 12 different species worked together on what they now called the Terran Protocol, the human method for restarting dead stars. In the main laboratory, she found Dr. Chen working with a team of Zephyrian engineers. They were building a new type of stellar defibrillator, one designed specifically for treating stars infected with dark matter parasites. "How's the project going?" Elena asked. Dr. Chen looked up from her work, grinning. "Better than expected. We've successfully restarted 6 more stars using modified versions of our technique. The Veilthans have figured out how to calculate the exact power requirements for different stellar masses. The Kreks have developed better shielding systems. Even the Cathara are contributing. Their emotional sensitivity helps them detect parasites that our instruments miss." Elena nodded approvingly. "And the parasites?" "Completely eliminated from this sector of the galaxy. Better yet, every star we restart develops immunity to reinfection. The plague has been stopped cold." Elena moved to the observation window and looked out at Kepler 442. The star burned bright and steady, exactly as it should. According to the reports, the 3 inhabited worlds in the system were experiencing their best growing seasons in centuries thanks to the increased solar output. "Captain Vasquez?" A musical voice called from behind her. Elena turned to see Prime, Minister Teclon approaching, the crystalline being moved with more energy than she remembered from their first meeting. "Prime Minister, how can I help you?" "I wanted to thank you," Teclon said simply. "And to apologize." Elena raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For not understanding what your species brings to the galaxy. We have spent millennia perfecting the art of elegant solutions, precise calculations, beautiful theories, but sometimes—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Sometimes the elegant solution is not the right solution." Elena smiled. Sometimes you just need to hit something with a really big hammer. Indeed, Theclon agreed. Your species has taught us something valuable. There is wisdom in attempting the impossible. Elena looked back out at the star. Prime Minister, can I ask you something? What made you change your mind about humans? Theclon was quiet for a moment. 3 things, he said finally. First, you succeeded where we failed. Second, you shared your knowledge freely instead of keeping it for yourselves. But most importantly, you risked everything to save beings you had never met, on worlds you had never seen. He gestured toward the bustling laboratory. Do you see what has happened here? For the first time in Coalition history, all 12 species are working together as true partners. The Valthons respect your practical problem-solving. The Kreks admire your courage. The Kithara are moved by your compassion. Elena hadn't really thought about it that way, but looking around the station, she could see what he meant. The rigid hierarchy that had characterized the Coalition was gone, replaced by something more collaborative. There's something else, Theclon continued. The Council has voted to establish a new division of the Coalition fleet, ships crewed by mixed species, designed to handle missions that require unconventional approaches. Let me guess, Elena said with amusement. You want humans to lead these missions? We want humans to teach us how to think like humans, Theclon corrected. Your species has a unique talent for looking at impossible problems and finding unexpected solutions. Elena considered the offer. What kind of missions are we talking about? Rescue operations in hostile environments, exploration of dangerous anomalies, situations where the odds of survival are minimal, but the potential rewards are enormous. Theclon's crystalline features somehow managed to convey a smile. In other words, the kind of missions humans seem to specialize in. Elena looked out at Kepler 442 one more time. The star that had been given up for dead was now burning brighter than ever, providing life and warmth to billions of beings. It was a reminder that sometimes the impossible just needed someone stubborn enough to try. When do we start? She asked. 3 weeks later, the first mixed-species coalition vessel launched from the station. The ship was called the Perseverance, and it carried a crew of 37 beings from 8 different species. The mission parameters were simple. Investigate a distress signal from the edge of known space, where something impossible was happening to the laws of physics themselves. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge as her mixed-species crew prepared for departure. Her first officer was a Velthon mathematician who had volunteered specifically to learn human-style problem-solving. Her chief engineer was a Krex warrior who had been impressed by Martinez's ability to make impossible machines work. Her science officer was Dr. Chen, who had become something of a celebrity among Coalition scientists. All stations report ready for departure, announced Lieutenant Park from the communications station. Elena looked out at the stars ahead of them. Somewhere in that vast darkness was another impossible problem waiting for someone crazy enough to solve it. Take us out, Mr. Martinez, Elena ordered. As the Perseverance jumped to faster-than-light speed, Elena smiled. The galaxy was full of impossible things that needed doing. Wars that couldn't be won, disasters that couldn't be prevented, problems that couldn't be solved. Lucky for the galaxy, humans had never been very good at accepting the word impossible. Behind them, Kepler 442 continued to burn bright, a testament to the stubborn refusal of one species to give up when everyone else had walked away. The star would burn for another 1 billion years, long enough for new civilizations to rise and old ones to evolve beyond recognition. But as long as there were humans in the galaxy, there would be someone willing to look at the impossible and say, we'll handle it. And somehow, impossibly, they usually did.